Asatu ma sadgamaya tamashu ma jyotirgamaya mrityorma mritangamaya avirabir maidhi rudro jatte dakshinang mukham te namang pahi nityam. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. O Lord, lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness to light and illumination. Lead us from death to immortality, and evermore shine in our hearts with your resplendent face. Om peace, peace, peace be unto us all. We are very happy today to have Gitaprana, who belongs to Hollywood, but he's out for a long time for a noble job. So he is the resident minister of our Vivekananda Retreat in Ridgely, Manor, upstate New York. And she is there since 2004, quite a long time. 2004, this is 2025, almost 25, quarter century, no?
Almost 21 years, yeah.
21 years. And she actually first was connected with our Berkeley Center, and her auntie, no? Madison. Dorothy Madison, who was the Ashokananda Swami's disciple, was her auntie, and she actually got inspired to join in 1984, as I said, and she was here all the time. When I joined I came 1993, I saw her here. As very active, as usual. Now she is having a great responsibility of a big manor house maintenance and retreat maintenance of the retreat house, the casino, and all other places associated with Swami Vivekananda. It's the most holy place of our order. And she's there and she's maintaining everything on behalf of me. I have to do something, but I don't do anything. I only go occasionally, once a year or twice a year, and she is taking the great responsibility of maintaining that. It is not a very easy job to mow a huge plot of land, to maintain that greenery of the place. The trees are falling, the electric line is getting dislodged, and it's a very problem after problem after problem. And also people go from different parts of US to visit that Ridgely Manor because it is associated with Swami Vivekananda, and they go in odd hours, odd time, and then appear, and then these are the people. There are 2-3 people to look after. So it's a big job she is doing, and so she is good. Who can tell us about what is going on in this Vivekananda and Vivekananda's philosophy and his work in Ridgely, and what was the past, what is present, and what is the future. Some ideas about that we want to hear from her. And she is, as you all know, that she was initiated by Swami Shahananda Maharaj in 1984, and she got sannyas from Swami Sarvagatanandaji. And she is very popular in performing puja. She prepared our Kali image in the temple for several years. How many years you did?
I think 4.
4 years. And the mother's image she created here, and she's good at singing and chanting and also puja. And also she started her enthusiasm in 2020 when COVID was very much rampant. So she started one program which is called online Ask Sisters. Ask the Sisters. So it has become very popular. Many of you know probably, and much appreciation comes out of that. They can meet all the nuns of our tradition here in West, in San Francisco nuns, our convent Hollywood and Santa Barbara all joined together. She's very inspirational. Okay, so we'll now welcome her to speak on Vivekananda and Ridgely, past, present, and future. Okay, thank you. She introduces me all the time, so I am introducing
I
her.
know. I was thinking, hey, wait a minute, this is backwards.
Okay, I'll go there to see you, listen to you better.
Truly, I'm the one that introduces him all the time. Although he doesn't need any introduction at Ridgely, really. So, I haven't been here, as he said, for almost 21 years. So I'm glad to see some friendly faces that are still here from after all that time. Swami Sarvadevananda asked me to give this particular talk. It's not my usual talk that I give, and it certainly isn't the talk that I've been up and down California giving either. So quite frankly, I haven't thought about this at all, but I live it. So it shouldn't be too difficult. Talking about Vivekananda Retreat, the centers on the East Coast know it obviously better than the centers on the West Coast because it's all the way across the country. But I think what I want to do is talk about it first in the present and then go back to the past. Because ideally, when we talk about Ridgely in the past, you really have to be there. Because I don't have a presentation or anything, the best way to find out about Ridgely in the past is actually to visit, because so much of it is the same as it was when Swami Vivekananda was there. And we would ordinarily, assuming, as Maharaj said, you didn't just show up without telling us, we would ordinarily give you a very nice tour of the whole place and the stories that are associated with every single area in the retreat. Because it is true that the Vivekananda Retreat, Ridgely Manor, is the place where Swami Vivekananda stayed the longest in his stays in the West. And it is a very saturated with his presence place if one is open to feeling it. Meaning, you're not on your cell phone constantly or your mind isn't somewhere else. If one is there, it just naturally, the presence of Swamiji is there. And so many people have told us that. Me, I'm the one, as Swami said, that maybe is thinking more about how to fix roofs and et cetera, and sometimes forget this. So Vivekananda Retreat Ridgely is technically a sub-center of the Vedanta Society of Southern California. But what that means is it's not like the centers like Santa Barbara or San Diego, which are actually part of the Vedanta Society of Southern California. Vivekananda Retreat is a totally separate organization with its own legal status and its own funding, and its only real connection with Southern California, Swami Sarvadevananda, myself, and another sister, Shudatma Prana. And both of us were posted there from Hollywood by Swami Swahananda. But otherwise, it functions as an entirely independent organization, entirely dependent on donations, actually. So the Vedanta societies, even on the East Coast, don't support Ridgely financially. They support Ridgely in many other ways. But so it's its own thing. I know I'm telling you this because there's always this endless confusion about it. Currently, it functions in three ways. That it is a retreat center. I don't know if you know about Olima, the Northern California's retreat center. Ridgely is a little like that. It's not on 2,000 acres, it's only on 82. It's set up to be a retreat center, not a center such as this one where it's local. It's very, very rural. It's in upstate New York, about 100 miles north of New York City. And I don't know if there's people here who've never been to New York, but you have to understand that the state of New York is not a city from end to end. that in actuality, it is gorgeous. And New York City occupies a very small piece of it. So it is very rural. It's in what is known as, well, it's more or less in what is known as the Hudson Valley because of the big Hudson River there. But Ridgely is kind of neither in the valley nor in the Catskills Mountains, but somewhere in between. It's called the Catskills Highlands. So it's not in the flat area by the river. It's fields and forest as only you know if you've ever been on the east part of the United States. It's like a different planet than California even. That gorgeously green trees everywhere, and that's what Ridgely is like. It's in a very small town. And we may know what small towns are like. Everybody knows everybody else's business. And I'll tell you a story about that in a minute. So there's a retreat houses there for women and men. And one can come and stay there for a length of time. And the better we know you, the longer you can stay. That there's also, people will come for day visits, and then we would give people really exhaustive tours of the whole property. We know many stories. I'm going to talk about that in a minute too. That there's another whole set of people that are very local people that come because we live in a very privileged part of the country that we don't have to worry about locking our doors. And so we keep the main house open from 6 in the morning till 7 at night. And there's a whole group of people that just come in and out and use the shrine in the same way that they would come here. And also walk on our property. That not necessarily connected with us, neighbors that couldn't care less about Vedanta, but they love to meditate in our shrine. So those are the kinds of people. Ridgely's devotees come from all over the Northeast. So locals, a few. There's not many people in the local area terribly interested. But then when you widen it out another 100 miles, we're pulling from New York City, from Connecticut, from Pennsylvania, from New Jersey, from Massachusetts, from Rhode Island, all around, because they're small states back there. And so that's Ridgely's circle of devotees. There are, as I said, 3 Victorian-style huge houses and 82 acres, most of which is fields and forest, but some of which is a shrine trail, some of which the shrine trail is underwater about half year because it's a different climate. It rains like crazy, especially this year. So Ridgely passed. I want to say something because I've been thinking about this, and it doesn't just pertain to Ridgely. It's about any place like Swamiji House or any other place that has a historical association, say with Swami Vivekananda or someone like that. Please, if you are visiting a house like that and someone is telling you some information that they've heard, please get your information from people who know what they're talking about. And the reason I'm saying this is because the Vedanta Society of New York, Swami Sarvapriyananda Center, comes up to Ridgely every July 4 and has a program. And so they bring 100, 150 people, and some of those people will act like foremost authorities and conduct tours and telling stuff like, what? Swami Vivekananda did what? You know, some mystical seance somewhere, and then somebody else comes and says, is it true that Swami Vivekananda held a seance? And what? Who told you that? So beware of foremost authorities, unless they're someone like us. If you want to know the particulars of the past of Ridgely, the best place to look is in Sister Gargi Marie Louise Burke's book, Swami Vivekananda in the West, Volume 5, The Great Summer. But even that may not be totally accurate. And the reason I'm saying this is we have to understand what are primary sources of stories and what are secondary. So say, for instance, a story about Swami Vivekananda at Ridgely is told by one of the people who were adults when he was there, Sister Nivedita, Josephine MacLeod, Betty Leggett, Francis Leggett, the family that owned the property. If they tell a story and it's recorded and it gets in the history, we can be pretty certain that story happened. If, say, for instance, the daughter of Francis and Betty Leggett, whose name was also Francis, tells a story, she was only 3 when Swami Vivekananda was there. So everything she knows came from somebody else. And I would like to remind you of that game called Telephone. You know what I'm talking about? The game where someone says something and then passes it to the next person. And then by the time it gets to the third person, the first message is totally distorted. So really, really, wherever we're talking about these things, the primary sources are the ones who are there and actually have the stories. So Swami Vivekananda, as you know probably, was traveling around the West and pretty much killing himself speaking. We know this, I mean, we have to consider what it was like in 1895 in particular, when he first came, to travel around the West and to give talks. There's no microphones, and the way to get there is only by train or sometimes by, the equivalent of bullock cart. And it was very, very strenuous. And then he would have to stand up and give a talk, but shout. And imagine that, shouting. And so his health was slowly, slowly dissipating. Jumping to how his association with Ridgely started, Betty Leggett, who is Betty Sturges then, because she had been married and her husband had passed away, and her sister, whose name is more familiar, Josephine MacLeod. Do you know that name? By the way, it's Josephine MacLeod, not just MacLeod. So, especially because we're talking about people from the 1800s who are very, very proper. And she would have been Miss Josephine MacLeod. And to call her MacLeod is the height of rudeness. So, Josephine and Betty had been attending classes that Swami Vivekananda was giving in New York. And Francis Leggett was helping Betty with some business things. Francis Leggett had taken his father's kind of almost like grocery cart business and turned it into a multi-million-dollar food import business. And then diversified as all those mega wealthy people did back in those days. So he owned shares in a railroad, he owned other shares and other things, but primarily he was known for being a food importer. So he knew Betty, and he once asked Betty and Josephine, well, would you like to go out to dinner with me? And they said no, but we are going to listen to a Swami from India. Would you like to come with us? And he said, all right. These were people who were, I think they were Episcopalian Christians. So he went with Betty and Josephine, and at the very end, he just got right up, walked up to Swami Vivekananda, and a big friendship began from there. That he wasn't exactly his disciple, but he was Swami Vivekananda's friend. Eventually, he was like his banker. If Swami Vivekananda was collecting money from tours, he would give it all to Francis Leggett, and he and his cousin Theodore Whitmarsh would take care of it. If Swamiji wanted anything from India, he would ask the Whitmarsh and Leggett to get it. They were like his security people, I guess you could say, in the United States. So Francis Leggett knew Swamiji was killing himself and said, hey, look, I have this beautiful property in New York, well, it's not exactly upstate. If you're a New Yorker, you would argue, but why don't you come? That's where I go to get away from the business world of New York, which back then was very corrupt, and he hated it. So being a man of real morals in the middle of Tammany Hall, he really didn't like it. So he built his estate, Ridgely Manor, which he called Ridgely Manor, to get away from New York. And also he and his business buddies wanted to develop that whole area into kind of like an elite business, what would you call it, vacation place? Because in those days, that was pretty much the extent of where you could go. You know, it's not like hopping on a plane and crossing the United States in 5 hours. So he had built Ridgely Manor as his own getaway. And he said to Swamiji, look, come there. We won't ask you to do anything. You can stay there as long as you like. You don't have to do anything that you don't want to do. Just rest, and we won't pester you at all. So Swamiji first went there in 1895, April, and spent a few days there. And then again, after moving around place to place, he returned to Ridgely in 1895 for a couple weeks at Christmas time. And then the second time he came to the United States, he stayed for a little over 2.5 months at Ridgely. And during that time is where most of the stories of Swami Vivekananda at Ridgely happened, which some of them are kind of very famous stories. So, and some of them never happened at all, and that's what I'm saying. So, this is where we would take you from place to place and say, this story had happened here. But it would be a little bit boring without being in the place. But let me just say that Francis Leggett, millionaire that he was, didn't have a will. And a few years after Swami Vivekananda went back to India and passed away himself, Francis Leggett was getting on the ferry in Manhattan in order to come to Ridgely, and either had a stroke or a heart attack and died on the spot, and had no will. So the majority of his estate, all his holdings, went to his daughter, who was only about 13 or 14 at the time, who was living in the UK. But at that age, she inherited $15 million, which in today's understanding would be 15 billion. And the family then lived off that money for 3 generations. So, for a long time since daughter Leggett, they're all called Francis, and this is why I'm not saying their names, that Francis was the original Leggett. Francis was the name of his daughter who inherited the property, and Francis is the name of her son who also inherited the property. So daughter Leggett was still in the UK for a very long time, and Ridgely Manor ended up being no one there. No one is there for 40 years. Only a caretaker, and daughter Leggett's half-brother, Hollister Sturges. You may have you heard the name Hollister? That Hollister Sturges was Betty's son by a previous marriage. And of all the Leggett family, was the only one to remain in that area. Everybody else took off for Europe. So, because of that, very little renovation of the property happened, which for us is fantastic, because everything is almost exactly the way that it was when Swami Vivekananda was there. And not only that, much of the furniture that was there when Swami Vivekananda was there is still there, at least in the main house, what we call the Manor House. So, and there are stories associated with all these places that I could tell. I don't know if you would think it would be boring, and tell me if you do. So, here's one that you've probably heard, that for a long time, Swami Atmarupananda, who had been at Ridgely for 6 years before me, myself and Shudatmaprana, who was also there, didn't think happened at Ridgely at all. And that was the story about Hollister and the golf course. So you may have heard the story. The idea, Hollister, who was 15 at the time, was at the golf course hitting golf balls, right? And Swamiji had never seen this game before and said, well, what are you doing? And so Hollister explained to Swamiji the rules of golf. The idea that the real thing to do is to get a hole in one, meaning you hit it in the hole the first time from a very long distance. And Swamiji said, oh, I could do that. And Hollister said, no, you can't. It takes practice. Because remember, these people, they knew Swamiji in a way that we never will. So Swamiji bet him. They bet money. And some people say $20. That's some people say 10, and some people say 50, but I doubt it, because you have to add a zero onto that to go back to 1899. So $100, where is Hollister going to get $100? So it may have just been a name for fun, like kids do, I bet you. So Swamiji did actually hit the ball and got a hole in one on the first try. And we doubt Hollister paid him. But for a long time, we said that can't possibly have happened at Ridgely, because no Leggett, no Sturgis, no anyone in the neighborhood ever remembered there being a golf course on that property. And there's we've searched every inch. There's no random golf balls hidden somewhere. There's nothing. So we were saying, well, maybe that story happened at a very famous hotel 5 miles away called Mohonk Mountain House, that actually did have one of the very first golf courses in the United States that was built about then. And the Leggetts, we knew the family that built that hotel. And there's no doubt that they took Swamiji up there for a visit, if nothing else. And we thought, okay, that's probably where that story happened. But there's a devotee in Kansas City who has a blog about some of you might know, Swami Vivekananda Travels or something like that. And she goes through the internet looking for information about Swami Vivekananda. So she sent me a newspaper article from one of the local cities from 1890, probably 1892 or 3. Francis Leggett has built a golf course at his estate in Stone Ridge. So there was a golf course there. Now it's a matter of speculation where it was, because there's no indication. So like that, stories. There's a wonderful story that definitely happened at Ridgely, that when they were leaving at the end of 1899, and this is not a well-known story, it comes from the letters of Sister Nivedita, who was there at that time. Sister Nivedita, Sarah Bull, many other people. When they were getting ready to leave in October, I believe it was, and Sister Nivedita was helping Swamiji pack his bags, he said, let's go see Sarah Bull. Now, Sister Nivedita, I think, probably was a little bit judgmental about the very wealthy lifestyle that the Leggetts lived. And she refused to stay in the fancy house. So they put her in another house that was on the property. And Sarah Bull didn't want Sister Nivedita to stay there all by herself, so she also stayed there. So it's a 5, 6, 7 minute walk from where Swamiji was to go see Sarah. And so he pulled a Garawa cloth out of his suitcase, and they walked to find Sarah, Sister Nivedita and Swami Vivekananda. And when they got there, he took the Garawa cloth and he wrapped it around Sarah Bull's shoulders. And then he put one hand on her head and the other hand on Sister Nivedita's head and stood there for a while. And when he stopped, when he came back, he said, as my master has done for me, I am now doing for you. And what that alludes to is, you may remember the story when Sri Ramakrishna put his hand on Naren's head, the future Swami Vivekananda, and Naren lost kind of outer consciousness. And when he came back, Sri Ramakrishna was in front of him with his hands folded, saying, I have given you everything that I have, and now I'm just a poor fakir. So Swamiji was alluding to that. And he said to Nivedita and to Sarah Bull, I have been so worried. I know I have a mission, and that the Divine Mother gave me the mission to the West. But I have been worried all along that I would mess it up, that I would ruin it somehow. So because sometimes Swami Vivekananda's life is starting to pass into hagiography. Wouldn't you agree? That some of these stories are being forgotten. And instead, a story of the triumphal march through everywhere. But in actuality, in the West, he was on his own, and he truly was not sure what he was doing. He had an idea, and the divine was definitely speaking through him. But so he told Sarah Bull and Sister Nivedita, suddenly I thought, this mission was given to me by the mother, I can pass it on to the women. And so I have done that, and now I am free. I don't have to worry anymore. And then he packed his bags and went on to first New York, where he didn't give any talks, and then he came here. And the other thing about Swamiji Ridgely during his time is that there is a story, and it comes from Josephine and a young artist named Maud Stubb, who, I don't know if you know all that much about Victorian etiquette, and especially upper class Victorian etiquette, but in the upper class, the women never, if there's more than one story in a house, the women never went downstairs where all the main rooms were in the morning because they let the servants clean then. So they always had a larger room upstairs that they called the morning room, where they hung out and wrote, huge amounts of letters and diaries and what they did. And so apparently they said, they were in there, and they said, Swami Vivekananda burst into the morning room declaring for liberty. And he said, I know what my message is. And basically, I can't remember it. Shuddhatmaprana has a much better memory for exact kinds of things, but he was saying, let us not be good because somebody back in the past was good. Let us be good on our own 2 feet. Let us stand on our own, not try to imitate the saints and sages of the past, but through our own divinity, let us stand there. And he had said, I think I'm going to start talking about this more. And if you look at the talks that he gave when he came to California, and after that, wherever he went, it changed. His message definitely radically changed. And the Swami Vivekananda that we know and inspired by, at least in the West, are much more after he left Ridgely. So at Ridgely, he kind of was able to get into a certain mindset about his mission. There were places he loved to meditate, and they're still there, and we know where they are. There are things he liked to do knowing Swamiji, who I'm pretty sure it was in the house of the Hale sisters, where he roller skated through their hallways. Isn't it right? He roller skated through somebody's house. At Ridgely, one of the houses, which is now the women's retreat house, part of it is a bowling alley. Was a bowling alley. So in Swami Vivekananda's time, it was a bowling alley, and you can still see the lanes, the boards that were the lanes on the floor. Only daughter Leggett's generation built different rooms smack on top of that floor. So now there's a lot of rooms, but the bowling alley is not there anymore. So I'm sure he bowled there. He was everywhere on that property. And that's why it's so pervaded with his presence. That he tried everything. He wasn't someone who just stayed in his room and meditated. He knew everybody. This young artist, Maud Stum, was giving Swamiji art lessons while he was at Ridgely. And there's a story about her that many people don't know. So in the dining room at Ridgely, imagine, it's not huge, like mega wealthy. Ridgely is actually pretty small for a big estate. And in the dining room, the seating would have been very much formal. And Swamiji didn't always show up because he didn't really like so much all this formality. And he really didn't, as you may know, like being shown off as some kind of exotica. So he would often eat and run. So if you know Victorian etiquette, you know that's not okay. So in the world of Victorian etiquette, nobody who was a guest at the table left until the hostess stood up. But Swamiji didn't have to follow the rules. And so he often ate and ran. And if Betty wanted him to stay, she knew he loved chocolate ice cream. And so if he looked like he was going to get up, she would say, "There will be chocolate ice cream for dessert." And he would sit back down and wait. And that's a very famous story. That definitely happened. Another thing, this artist Maud Stum, she was not wealthy. She was there and not actually staying at Ridgely. She was staying at a hotel in the village of Stone Ridge. And Swamiji would walk her back to her hotel every night. So you think, wow, she should have told more about her associations with Swami Vivekananda, because there's a whole story missing there. Anyway, so she was sitting at this fancy table in the fancy dining room, and Betty had invited her fancy wealthy friends to meet Swami Vivekananda. But Maud was not wealthy at all. We could say she was a starving artist kind. And she was quite talented. And she was looking at the women there. And what do you think the women were wearing? The Victorian equivalent of designer clothes and very expensive jewelry. All of them in the latest fashions, decked out. And Maud was looking around, and she said, "I started to feel jealous." And Swami Vivekananda called Maud baby. He often had nicknames for people, as you may know. We don't know why he called her baby, maybe because she was one of the youngest ones there, and or maybe she was small, but he did. And so the moment she started to feel jealous, she looked up, and Swami Vivekananda, with his stare as only he could do, was staring right at her. And under his breath, he said to her, "Don't be fooled, baby." And she totally understood what that meant. Like, drop it. It means nothing. And for the rest of her life, she remembered that story. And then the very few stories that she did pass down, that was one of them. So Ridgely is filled with stories like that. That if you come to Ridgely, and you should if you're ever on the East Coast, there are just so many stories associated with Swami Vivekananda that happened there in a way that isn't hagiography yet. These stories really happened, and it portrays Swamiji kind of like the new Letters of Swami Vivekananda, the new, was it 4-volume set, that has so many annotations that you get a whole different idea about who Swami Vivekananda was, that at Ridgely you also get a different idea. And the Swami who hung out with the kids and kind of avoided being the party favor, and sometimes would start talking, and the people who were sitting and listening to him would sit there and listen to him all night long, and nobody would know that the whole night had gone by. That happened at Ridgely more than once. Not a formal talk, but they just happened to sit down, he just happened to start talking, the whole night went by, and they hadn't even noticed. Now imagine that kind of a presence. That was a lot of energy, of course, on his part, but he didn't feel it. Of course, back then, Swamiji's message has actually succeeded in the West. That the things that he was talking about back in 1899, many of those things have become part, at least, of the culture. We know what karma is. Guru, mantra, pandit, all these words are now kind of weirdly into the English-American idiom. But back then, nobody knew any of this, except for very few transcendentalists in the East and other kinds of people like that. So everything they heard was challenging them or something new. And sometimes, as you know, he challenged them to the point where they couldn't take it and they walked out. So that's the Ridgely that still sort of exists. I like to think once when I was here and Swami Shraddhananda from the Sacramento Center was visiting, and I think I was the one doing the puja at the time, he said to me, well, you know, when you come into a holy place like this, you have to remember that time is an illusion. And in actuality, all the holy people that have ever been here in the past and will ever be here in the future are actually here right now. And that should be your attitude when you walk into the temple. And I thought, this is a wonderful way of who have piles of responsibilities will feel that. And actually, if I start getting overwhelmed by responsibilities, I'll just stop and say, wait a minute, where are you, Gitaprana? Of the mother, they didn't. And what I mean by that is ice storms. California people don't know about ice storms, but if you came from anywhere in the Midwest or the East, you know when ice gets on every surface all around, trees cannot bear the weight of that. And as it gets heavier and heavier, of course, the branches start to fall. And we had one ice storm where literally every 30 seconds, what we would hear is crack, bam. And that every 30 seconds, it can be difficult there. But still, it is absolutely, I would never dream of saying, oh my God, why did I come here? That it is definitely Swamiji's place. And so, in the future, I hope, you can't really say what the future of any Vedanta societies is going to be, but we hope that they will go on. We hope that there will be someone who follows us, as all of us who've been here for a while are getting older and older, that to come and follow and keep the history going. It's kind of like Swami Swahananda loved this one joke. You know what it is? You know what it is, because I think we were talking, no, maybe it was. The man who prayed and prayed, oh Lord, let me win the lottery. You know that joke? So, a man was praying endlessly to the Lord. Oh, please, 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 God, let me win the lottery. I am such a devotee of yours every day, pestering and pestering. Please let me win the lottery. And finally, a voice comes, let's say, from heaven, and the voice says, son, at least buy a lottery ticket. So, as for all of these centers in the future, it's up to the divine, it's up to the mother, it's up to Sri Ramakrishna, or however, if they want it to continue, it will, but we have to buy the lottery ticket. In other words, we ourselves who are here have to make the pathway. We can't just say, oh, please, please, please. And so likewise, Vedanta societies, likewise Ridgely. I think Swamiji will keep Ridgely going, but I have, I don't really know. I know that the Leggett family has an interest in keeping Ridgely going. They don't own Ridgely, but I'm very much, I know them. And they also, Percy when I'm no longer here. So how can we work that out? So these things will happen. I think that's just, I could go on and on telling you stories, but I don't want to. And I really would rather that when you're on the East Coast, you come there. Because if you're actually in the atmosphere and you see these places, because they really literally are the exact same places, in some cases the exact same furniture, in the exact same configuration as they were when Swamiji was there. So I invite everyone. I know it's all the way across the United States, but often people travel, and all you have to do is call us. So I think Maharaj has something to say. So think. All right.
Can you tell us what happened at Ridgely that brought Vivekananda to California?
Do you know? Because I don't. I know that Josephine was...
she got a telegram about
her brother, yeah. Josephine's brother was not well here. And so she was coming to California. Oh, I know what I can say. And Swamiji then came with Josephine. Now, here's an interesting thing. And this is the thing. There's still history to find. And one of them has to do with this. So when Josephine and Betty were here with Swami Vivekananda, they, as we know from the history, visited Redlands. And I always thought, why? Why Redlands? Why did they go there? But of all the places in Los Angeles he could have visited. But it turns out the very family that we thought that owned the golf course in New York, Mohonk Mountain House, the Smiley family, also had a very famous hotel up by Mount Baldy in Redlands. And the Leggetts knew the Smiley family very well, and I'm pretty sure that when they went to Redlands, they took Swamiji there again to meet the Smileys, the Smiley brothers. That's why they probably went. So I asked the current family, who still owns that hotel, do you have any of your guest books from 1899? And they said, no, they're all at the Smiley Library in Claremont, here. So someone who has an interest in history could go or maybe access their archives and see if Swami Vivekananda signed anything, wrote anything. It would have been in New York, and maybe there was a guest book from the Smiley brothers in Redlands. Might be something there. The Leggetts, I'm going to tell you this, and I'm going to tell you why, because it's a piece of history. Ordinarily, this isn't like the Leggetts currently, past and present, do not like Josephine MacLeod at all. And it has to do with the history that daughter Leggett, Josephine MacLeod and Betty, her mother, had the idea that if you want a child to learn French, you stick them in a boarding school in France. And if you want them to learn music, you take them to Vienna and leave them there. And so daughter Leggett was very lonely, and you know those European boarding schools weren't easy for the children. And so she sent a telegram to her father saying, help, get me out, who was in New York. So he sailed to London, to wherever she was, found Betty, who was traveling around Europe, and said, we can't do this anymore. And so what they decided to do was leave daughter Leggett, Frances, with Lady Isabel Margeson, who was one of Swamiji's people in London. And so daughter Leggett grew up in that family. And she ended up marrying one of the sons, David Margeson, who at that time eventually became defense minister for the UK during the Second World War. And it wasn't going well at all. So they basically kicked him upstairs and gave him a title. And daughter Leggett didn't really like, she was more like her father. She preferred to be a hermit and hated being a political wife. So when her kids were old enough, she came back to the United States. But anyway, Betty and Josephine ended up living in Shakespeare's daughter's house in Stratford-on-Avon in the UK. And Betty, when she was older, fell down the stairs and broke probably a main bone or her hip in such a way that possibly the bone was kind of protruding, and she got sepsis. And the kids are all far away from her, and in those days you can't just call, not cell phone, nothing. And we're asking, how's my mother, how's my mother? And Josephine, with her characteristic what would you say, upbeat kind of maybe not all the way practical outlook, and her fascination with alternative healing, kept saying, she's fine, she's fine. But she wasn't fine. And it was Hollister, the son, who was actually in Stone Ridge in New York, that figured out, no, something's not right. So he telegrammed to his sisters. One was the wife of the Earl of Sandwich by then, and the other in the UK, saying, you better go, there's something wrong. But by the time they got there, she had died. And so they don't really like Josephine, and has been passed down through the other thing, last thing I'll tell you is this: Ridgely almost wasn't, in the sense that Vivekananda Retreat almost wasn't. So the Margesons, in other words, the last of the Leggett family owning it, selling it to the corporation, the nonprofit that became Vivekananda Retreat Ridgely. But in order to do that, the town has to approve that sale, because all that tax money is now going off the town's roll. And small town, and not terribly excited about a bunch of strange Hindu cult people. And not only that, the Reverend Moon's people had tried to take over a nearby town in the 1970s. And memories are long in these small towns. But here's another thing that's long in small towns. There's usually a family or two who's pretty much they're rulers of that town. They may not actually be on the town boards, but they've been there for generations, and the town listens to them, especially if they're upstanding citizens. So in daughter Leggett's day, she knew Swami Nikhilananda. And actually she, for some reason, was feeling like she should arrange the complete works or the letters of Swami Vivekananda, and Swami Nikhilananda was helping her. And so he would come to Ridgely, she would invite him, and being the society lady that she was as she grew up, she, in all this, would have other people there, and naturally she would have cocktail hour. And Swami Nikhilananda didn't like cocktail hour, so he would go out. There's no fences there. It's just the kids in the neighborhood grew up running wild in all this area. And Swami Nikhilananda would go and find the kids and tell them stories from the Mahabharata. So this is like 40s? Yeah. So now it's 1997. And one of those kids was Bill Davenport, who to this day is Mr. Stone Ridge. And he was one of those children who often heard Swami Nikhilananda have nothing to do with Vedanta. He was just a neighborhood kid listening to Mahabharata stories. And so he is the upstanding, his opinion rides huge weight even today in Stone Ridge, and he's almost 90. And he said the town board meeting happened, and they were going to vote no. They were absolutely against it becoming Vivekananda Retreat. And Bill Davenport, who was back then, I guess, probably in his 60s, got up and said, you know, I really don't see what the fuss is here. That I know these people. I know they're not going to turn their land into a trailer park. I know they're going to be quiet. I know they're going to be an asset to this community. And I actually figured out that we all will have, the residents of Marbletown, Stone Ridge, will have to pay 40 cents a year or more to have this wonderful place. So I don't see why you would even consider voting no. And Bill Davenport was the one who told me this story. And because he said that, they voted yes. And since then, a few other people who had been at that meeting said, oh yeah, we were at that meeting and that's what happened. So we have Swami Nikhilananda actually to thank for the fact that we have Vivekananda Retreat, even though he was long gone by 1997. So now my time is definitely up. Please come and visit. Now, Maharaj, are you going to say something?
We see that how it was so lively, no? It was more than talking about Vedanta. I am only Atman and Brahman, but it is a practical application of Vedanta and how it is working there under the leadership of Gitaprana and Shuddhatma Prana. So really I enjoyed it and knew so many stories, no, behind and how it is so vibrant. And really, if we go there and they take us one spot to other spot, they take 2-3 hours time. Shuddhatma Prana sometimes takes them to one place to another. So it is really feeling some vibrant presence. People feel that way. People go there for that reason. But sometimes people misunderstand because it is some odd area and they cannot entertain them as we can do in any other place. So anyhow, okay, thank you Gitaprana for giving this wonderful talk. And first today also we have one acquisition from Belur Math, Swami Gyano Sudhananda. He is here on you came on 27th?
Last month,
14th of June. So he is here with us. Belur Math has sent him to be a part of our Vedanta Society of Southern California. We welcome him again. And I wanted to talk about him. So to introduce him here, he was in our Belur Math headquarters in administrative office for last 12 years. And he was initiated by Ranganathan Maharaj. And so he is he knows the tradition of our order in the headquarters, being a part of it. So we want to introduce you, our Gyano Sudhananda Swami. Please come and I will request you to say a few words.
Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu Namah Shri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Suraye Satchit Sukhaswarupaya Swamine Tapaharine. Revered Swami Sarvadevanandji, other Atmavidyanandji, other monks and respected nuns, and dear devotees. I'm extremely glad to be here in this Vedanta Society of Southern California, Hollywood. As you all know, this Vedanta Center is associated with such illustrious monks as Swami Prabhupada. So many great monks have lived here, and the temple here, even in India, I had heard from many monks that the Hollywood Center has a very beautiful temple. The spiritual atmosphere is very palpitating. So palpable atmosphere is there. So after reaching here, yes, I found that yes, it is true. It's such a beautiful place, and unlike many other Vedanta centers in the West, here we have a number of monks. Say, usually 1 or 2 monks live in Vedanta centers, but here we have almost 10 monks living here and many nuns. So a good monastic community, and it's a vibrant society here. So many devotees come. We have guests almost every other day. So I'm not at all missing Belur Math. So Belur Math, as you know, it's the worldwide headquarters. Hundreds of monks live and thousands of devotees come every day. But something like that here in the West, we have this Hollywood Center. It's very great. And then any Vedanta monk or any religious teacher who stands before a Western audience cannot but remember Swami Vivekananda, because he brought the message of India, the message of Vedanta to the West. And his life was so eventful. See, we just heard Gitaprana telling us about Swamiji's stay in Vedanta in the Ridgely Manor. See, Swamiji visited that place 3 times, and the third visit, which was the longest, it was for about 2 months or little more than that. See, Swamiji lived only less than 40 years, right? So in that short span, he did so many things. He visited so many places, met so many people, wrote hundreds of letters, delivered so many talks, classes, so eventful. Just the other day, Maharaj was telling us in the reading class that just his 2 months of stay in Ridgely Manor has infused so much of spirit in Ridgely. And just imagine if we only can acquaint ourselves with all that he has done, all the places he visited. It is so wonderful, so wonderful. So Swamiji, there is so much to know, and so interesting and so inspiring. But for all that, see, we have to remember that Swamiji was not a worker, in the sense Swamiji was not a person who would just go about to different places and meet people and lecture. All those things were not of his taste. It was not his cup of tea. He himself acknowledged that, see, I like meditation and scholarly pursuits. That was his bent of mind. So he had the command. So Sri Ramakrishna, he said that you should teach. So he commanded him to do this Vedanta work here, and also much more work in India, establish the organization, all that he did. But nevertheless, till the end, he was the most, we can say, unwilling worker. So I read that, in one lecture given by Swami Ashokananji, that it's an irony. So Swami Vivekananda, who was so unwilling to work, to engage himself in such activities, could do so much. See, there is an irony involved there. So only Ashokananji says that only a person who gives himself entirely to the absolute, to the eternal principles, can do so much of good in this relative world. So only such people can do good here. Others, they may say that yes, they are genuinely interested in the relative world, but unless they have their grounding in that absolute, they cannot do much. Or even if they do much, it will not last long. So Swamiji was such a great person, spiritual personality, that yes, his mind was always soaring high above in the absolute plane, but his work was for the people living in this world, and his work, his legacy endures even today. So I was very happy to listen to Gitaprana, so interesting, and some of the stories I knew, but because as she said, she is living there and she knows many people firsthand. So hearing from her mouth was really interesting and very, very illuminating. Thank you. So I look forward to seeing you all again and again. Thank you.
So now we'll greet you all here. Gitaprana will be there and you will be there, I will be there. And afterwards you can have some questions with Gitaprana when she is in the living room. And next Sunday our talk is Mahayogananda will be speaking on the topic the meditation mantra. And the other classes are as usual. I will end here with one closing chant. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Shri Ram Krishna Panamas